Hi, this is Dr. Randy Hurst. I'm doing a number of videos that are just basic mental health education, trying to help people understand why they might get into problems with anxiety or addictions or depression, problems that over time can get worse to the point of interfering with relationships, jobs, health, a variety of things. An important piece that I try to start out with or end with is this is just basic education. I'm not making any recommendations for any given person. If you take on any of these ideas, if you try anything out, use what works. If it gets bad, if you're doing something that causes you to feel really not right, slow down, back up a little bit, see if that helps. But if you're really having problems, get professional help, because this is not at all any kind of, a substitute. If anything, I hope that it would provide the kind of information that would help be able to make changes without the cost or inconvenience or appointments and all of the scheduling and all of that. At the same time, if you end up seeing somebody, I'm hoping this information can give you a head start so that you may not have to see a therapist as long because you already have good information. So this particular video is on Fire Together, Wire Together. It's based on a speculation, let's call it, by Donald Hebb 68 years ago or so, in the either late 40s, early 50s. Yeah, he was a Canadian psychologist who was known as the father of neuropsychology. And one of the things he said, or at least what it's been distilled down to, is that nerve cells, or neurons, that fire together, wire together. And he thought of this as a memory, that if there's a circuit of nerve cells, brain cells, that start firing in some pattern that is some behavior or some tune, say, the pattern or of the notes going together, the way they go together, that could be a tune that as those nerve cells that hear those particular notes follow that particular pattern, you learn that as a particular tune. For me, part of the fascination for this was my wife enjoying a Portland morning radio station where they played Stump the Jock. And the idea here was they played 4 or 5 notes and left it open for the radio audience to call if they could recognize the tune. And if you called in at the right time, like the 5th caller or something, and could identify the tune, you'd get some prize. I don't remember what the prizes were. Well, what intrigued me was that just 2, 3, 3 or 4 notes could trigger the brain cells in a way that would probably, what made sense, was would complete the next note, the next note, the next note, if it fit the right pattern, and go, I know that one, and be able to call in, try to get the prize. Well, what if all memories were like this? And now, I couldn't do well with this because I'm not really a music person. My wife loves music. She listens a lot, plays a lot, sings a lot. And so she knew a lot of them because she had heard those patterns a lot. So it struck me that if somebody with an anxiety disorder who, when they get anxious, avoids the thing that's causing them nervousness, well, that would be a pattern that the brain cells, just like with the music, the more you do it, the more locked in it is, the more automatic it is. Think of other things. Music might not be, but everybody who drives, in the beginning, you're very nervous, you're paying a lot of attention, your muscles are tense. After you've driven for years, you're not thinking nearly as much. Things are very automatic. Think of typing, texting. Same thing. In the beginning, you're paying a lot of attention. You're typing letter by letter by letter. Once you have typed for a long time, you're not really paying attention to where the keys are, what the letters are. You're typing words. You may not even think, the fact, the words that you've typed the most become the most automatic. Well, what if the person who avoids certain thoughts, certain situations, certain people, if that starts to lock in, become automatic, become autopilot, like typing, dribbling for a basketball player, driving, riding a bike, those become very automatic. We don't think about them. They just happen. That's what our brain does. And we don't really plan to develop this pattern of automatic avoidance of anxiety or reactions to anxiety. Same with something like drinking. Does somebody intend to have an alcohol problem? You know, I worked for many years in the alcohol and drug treatment field. I really didn't find, I did find a couple, but essentially nobody really intends to become an alcoholic or drug addict. It happens quite a bit. But people intend to have a good time. Or people intend to just relax, be social. And in time, it can become just a regular part of what they do. They plan on, in the beginning, you make plans for Saturday night, Friday night, Tuesday night, any night. Later, it just becomes part of what's the right flow because you've done it. The pattern of cell firings becomes more and more automatic in much the same way as typing. Now, with drinking and drugs, you've got a whole other issue of physical dependence that can be there. You know, with smoking cigarettes is a great one. Who plans to develop a full-fledged addiction and put themselves at risk for? Isn't it interesting that everybody thinks of lung cancer is what I'm going to say, but heart attacks and stroke are a bigger issue than lung cancer for smoking issues? But who plans on that as their outcome? It becomes the outcome unless somebody recognizes, wait a minute, this pattern is not good. Wait a minute, my spouse, my children, somebody is saying, there's a problem here. This isn't going well. This isn't right. You're doing things that are hurting you, hurting us. What do you do if the pattern in your life has become so automatic you don't really think about it? And in fact, let me add to that if you try to change, it doesn't feel right. It goes against the pattern that the cells systems, the cell assemblies is what Dr. Hebb referred to them as, that these circuits aren't going through the circuit the patterned way. And so it doesn't feel right. And so if people go by how they feel, they're going to go with what feels right, what feels like who I am. And it won't change. Or if they really try to change, it's hard, especially if you go by how you feel, because that's a huge key to these neurons that fire together, wire together. They get wired pretty deeply. The longer you've gotten into a pattern that you recognize as a problem, the more it feels like a loss, the more that it just doesn't feel right to not do what you've done. And then there's an old saying from when I worked in the treatment field, if you do what you always done, you'll get what you always got. And so how do you do that new thing. It can't be by just deciding and automatically doing it. I have seen some people that just do their new life no matter what. And they're almost unfazed, it seems. But almost everybody kind of consults their internal sense of how I feel and what feels right. And those people will slide back into the old pattern unless they recognize that I am not my brain. And you don't have to. I mean, certainly people just do differently. But what I've found is that when I help people understand this is how the brain works, it gets into what nowadays they're actually calling, if we've done something very regularly, it becomes this default routine. So if you're around computers at all and you learn about there's this default, the circuit just goes on autopilot. I call it autopilot. And that's the enemy, because to the extent that you go with the default, go with the autopilot, you're not thinking. And you're going to slide into the old pattern, which in one of my other videos, you'll see a reference to what I call a monster making metaphor. And the monster is this circuit that the old pattern becomes the monster. And this not feeling right if you try to do differently is the reaction, the gut feeling, I don't like this. And how do you go ahead and do the new thing long enough to become the new pattern, to overwrite or form a new channel for the new circuit to happen? And unfortunately, the old circuits kind of stick around. And so one of the things that happens is again, another thing from the treatment community that I've used a lot is they refer to HALT. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I'd add stressed. But strong feelings can easily set us back into where we react in the old pattern, or have not necessarily react. The gut reaction can be the old pattern. And so how do we pick that up? How do we recognize, whoa, wait a minute, I'm getting into something that can take me down a bad path. That's not who I want to be anymore. And make yourself do the new thing until you've gone through enough situations, had enough times of choosing the new path, the new pattern, so that the wiring gets stronger there. That's when you know you're doing good battle with your own brain. But just to understand, you are not your brain. Will help you tremendously to get yourself to follow through and not react to the monster, so to speak, in the way that is the old pattern. Okay, look at the monster making metaphor and the other wired together fundamentals videos that I'll be having. I hope you enjoy. Again, if it becomes too much, get help. But I hope these will help you understand more and more and make changes, maybe, hopefully, on your own. Okay, thanks again.